there are some facts and there are some theories. And the equity problem is stuck between those two. So there's a fact that caesarean section and good obstetric care is very helpful and saves the lives of some women. And there's a theory that this will work equally well wherever we implement it, that health services anywhere in the world will be able to deliver this to the women who need it. If that theory was correct, we would be living in an equitable situation. But it's not correct. And so we'll end up with this tension between a fact of something that works and a theory that we can get it to everyone who needs it. So there are three very practical things between the theory and the fact. The first is that if women in some country in Africa, we're working in Nigeria right now, go to their local health service, they don't necessarily find first-class obstetric care, which is what's needed for caesarean section and for any tertiary level intervention, but particularly now caesarean section. What they find in many cases is that the health service doesn't have even water. Where it does have water, it probably doesn't have trained personnel. And where it does have trained personnel, these are either contracting on a private basis for those who can pay, or they're privatizing themselves, paid by the state, and then still accepting extra payments for the service. So these women are basically excluded from this option that should have been available to them, or that theoretically is available to them. There's a second thing to do with it, which is that the assumption that they can go to a service and they will go to a service has a main obstacle in the path in the form of the man. You got to think about, if you say to women, go to the health service, or a broader message, take the pregnant women to the health service, who you're really addressing is men. And there's pretty well nothing in the programmatic delivery that deals with men. There's a third issue, which is that for many women, birth is basically, for 9 women out of 10, a natural and normal process that doesn't need any surgeons of category. When we conclude from our fact that caesarean section works and our theory that we will deliver it to those who need it most, one of the casualties of this is that we override culture, which is a major aspect of equity. I'm comfortable with who I am. If I come from one indigenous group or another, I'm comfortable in that group. And if a system simply rides over that, you've got to say, well, how are we handling the equity issue, the cultural equity issue here? If you say, well, so how do we address equity in maternal health? Well, starting with the cultural issue, one has to respect culture as a first layer of equity. And one can do so with very good effect in terms of women surviving more and having fewer complications. One has to involve men, and one has to do it at the household. So simply saying, take people to the services is a major violence in terms of equity, because it wipes out a whole series of truths and a whole series of realities in this averaging out, this really non-equitable approach by saying, ignore your rights, ignore your culture, ignore who's really taking decisions, and let's pretend that we're all going to get the same bite of the cherry, the same access to services. So our work in Nigeria has come around to the understanding that we really have to go back to first principles of primary health care, of access at the household, of knocking on doors, of discussing with men and women, of finding out what their preferences are and their possibilities, and building the system around that.